Hi everybody! So, been a long time since the last video. Last video I uploaded was last month in October, talking about favorite horror movies for spookathons and such, yada yada yada. I'm in a really good mood as of late. I also decided to bring out this big old boy again. And I'm going to be doing two videos, this one and another one, which covered two movies Barbara and I saw at the theater the other day. I'll get to those in a bit, but first off, I want to do this big one. This is actually something that has a bit of a weird story behind it of how I got around to doing it, so just bear with me. So, back in September, just a few months after my birthday, my grandmother died. And it wasn't a good day. And the following days that happened afterwards kind of got a little bit worse afterwards. The funeral wasn't good, all that stuff. It was pretty rough. So on the day when that happened, my girlfriend's friend, Sydney, decided to take us to go see a movie, and it was of my choice, and I went with the New Mutants, the final installment of the X-Men franchise. They weren't all that interested in it, but I mean, they liked some bits about it, but it didn't fully connect with them. Whereas for me, I got really into it, and I think that's just because I'm a bit biased towards the X Men movies. I always have been. It's been a pretty much a staple of my childhood ever since the first film back in 2000. Even going back further than that, I've always been a fan of the X Men itself. Like, I remember loving the 90s cartoon and even watching X Men Evolution and sticking with the films. So, it's been a pretty heavy staple on my life. And as a result of as a result of watching New Mutants, and also getting a neat little Wolverine poster around the time when the funeral happened, it actually reinvigorated me to go back to watch the X-Men films. I've got quite a few of them, and it even convinced me to buy my least favorite of the bunch. You'll get the backstory of that one later. And so I rewatched the Wolverine, and I was really enjoying it, and it got me energized to rewatch the films all over again. I had to put it off because the month later in October, there was some stuff going on top of that. That was spooky month, so I had to focus on horror movies. But as soon as November rolled around, I went straight back to kickstarting up my X Men marathon. And in an unconventional way, I actually decided to do it in order of release. Not in order of release, but actually in terms of like the sequence of events, which I know the X Men movies don't exactly have the best continuity, but hey, it's relatively accurate to what it's like reading a comic book series, right? It's messy as shit. Everybody's got different creative decisions, so. So, with that in mind, I'm actually going to talk about these films in the order that I would say they should be watched in, which means, like I'm going to start off with a movie that's from the 2010s and then into the 2000s and watch it here and watch it there. It's an odd order, but it does work and it actually does create a bit of like a more coherent sequence of events to kind of see of how they all sort of connect with each other. Admittedly, I don't have all the X-Men movies with me. The only ones I don't have are the Deadpool films, Dark Phoenix, and Dark Phoenix, X-Men Origins Wolverine, and the New Mutants. Out of all those, I'm probably only going to get New Mutants. The other four I can live without. Um, but right now, I want to get started on these. I really do genuinely like quite a bit of these movies. They've been a major part of my childhood. It sucks that we're not going to get any other films like these due to the Disney Fox purchase, which I will forever, ever despise. That is one of the worst things to have ever happened in the filmmaking industry. It was just a terrible, terrible thing, and I feel like we're not going to get as much, creative art as we should. Monopolies are bad, people. Anyway, enough doom and gloom. Let's start off with the first film that I suggest you watch first in this little X Men order. X Men First Class. Ironically enough, like this was actually, I remember when I first watched this. This was back in 2012, and not only was it a movie that helped actually get me back into rediscovering the X Men all over again. Funny how cycles work. it was also one of the first Blu-rays I ever purchased. This and The Big Lebowski. I just kind of bought them on a whim. And rewatching this one again, though I am very grateful that it managed to bring the X-Men franchise back when it came out in 2011, because the franchise was dangling on the ropes after the 1-2 almost franchise killing punch of X-Men The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine. This is the one that brought the series back to relevancy and into everybody's good graces again as a prequel to when Xavier and Magneto first met in the 1960s as they try and stop Sebastian Shaw, played by Kevin Bacon, from starting nuclear war. He was basically the guy who started the Cuban Missile Crisis, didn't you know? And it's one of those movies where it's like the project originally started off as a prequel to Magneto. There were going to be prequel films that were going to be origin movies, starting with Wolverine, then it was going to do Magneto and whoever else. But because Origins didn't do so well, they decided to rewrite the Magneto prequel into a straight up X-Men prequel instead. I gotta say, I really don't think that was the best decision. I'm glad everyone else liked it, but for me personally, First Class is a film that I have quite a bit of problems with. All the Magneto stuff in the movie is absolutely perfect. It feels like had the movie just been completely focused on just Magneto's escapades and everything else was just in the background, this would be a tremendous film. But because it's also an X-Men prequel, it kind of feels imbalanced to me. Not to say that there isn't plenty of good things. I love the 60s setting. The score is great. All the performances across the board are fantastic. The chemistry between Fassbender and McAvoy is terrific. But there's also stuff in it that just doesn't work. Like, for example, there's a character they introduced named Darwin. This kid who has the ability to kind of, resist any attack. And he's super charismatic and he's fun to watch. And then they kill him off in the most punk-ass way possible. Like, come on, man. And on top of that, the moment the movie hits the third act, when all the typical superhero action stuff starts kicking in, it gets really silly looking. It's easy to buy, it's easy to get engrossed in all the stuff that goes on early on. But it's like, some of the green screening and CG effects that they use, I'm sorry, it does look bad. And this is my own personal problem. For a series that actually is pretty good when it comes to writing its female characters, this is the one that has the worst written of the bunch. I almost just couldn't believe how badly written the female characters are in it, especially when all the other films, even some of the not so good ones, have better written female characters in it than this one does. For example, what they do with Mystique. Man, some of these movies don't treat Mystique all that well. Some of them do, some of them don't. This is one of the ones that I don't think treats her that well. Though Jennifer Lawrence's performance is really, really good as a younger Mystique. The problem the way she's written is that she's just kind of standing there and just kind of complaining about things. She really doesn't get involved into the action. McAvoy and Fassbender's counterparts to what they eventually become in their older years when they're played by Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen feel absolutely consistent, but I see this Mystique played by Jennifer Lawrence, and then I see the one played by Rebecca Romijn in the original trilogy, and I'm like, are these even the same character? I don't get it. It's just what? Huh? And of course, the ham-handed betrayal that Angel does, played by Zoe Kravitz, when she goes to join Kevin Bacon's side, or how flat Emma Frost is, played by January Jones, not just because her performance isn't very good, but also just the fact that she just stands around, looks pretty in lingerie. Whoopee. And then you got Rose Byrne's Moira McTaggart, who is a very capable character, very confident, very charismatic. She's got a good grasp on the whole situation. And then they kind of turn her into a bimbo at the end when Xavier erases her memory of most of the events of the movie, and that just pissed me off to no end. I was like, oh dear God, why did you do that, Xavier? You are such a dick. Which, weirdly enough, Xavier can be a jerk. I know Xavier can be a major jerk in the comics, not so much in the movies. like, I can write that off as just like him just being in his younger years, abusing his powers, but I still don't like it. So First Class is one that I'm grateful that it fixed the franchise, but I've got issues with it. I will still gladly sit down and watch it, but it ain't perfect. Next one, the original X-Men, directed by Bryan Singer. Yes, that guy. It was interesting going back to this one because the last time I watched it was probably like either back in 2014 or 15. It was one of those years. And I remember liking it, but finding it a little unpolished. Like, to me, it felt like the budget limitations really held it down because everything else felt in place. And watching it again, that issue is still there. But what I really admired about watching it on this go round was just how tight it all felt. The script feels tight. The running time is concise and economical. It's to the point with its world building, character development. It feels like the movie knows exactly what it's doing despite the budget constraints behind it. And it's also just a movie that, like, when I compare it to all the other X-Men movies and I look at this one has a vibe and tone about it that almost feels like we're not really, like, for a movie that is considered one of the great heralds of comic book films, along with the original Spider-Man and Blade. This one doesn't even feel like a comic book movie. It feels like I'm watching this like weird sci-fi action horror movie instead. Um, I suppose that's what kind of gives it a unique feel, even among like other installments of the series and other comic book films in general. As I said, it's not, like, it's not without its issues, but there is still a lot of good stuff in it. Like, it definitely, unfortunately, still feels like a movie that was definitely from the early 2000s. It just has that weird vibe about it. And there's some stiff performances here and there, but as far as opening chapters go, it's still a damn good first movie. And as per usual, all the cast is terrific. Patrick Stewart, Hugh Jackman, Ian McKellen, Anna Paquin, Famke Jensen, Rebecca Romaine Stamos, James Marsden, Halle Berry, Tyler Mane. Like, there's so many good names in it, and everybody is so good at their performances that you can see how this was such a big hit back then. This was also actually one of the first movies I ever saw in a theater, or at least one of the ones I can actually remember, so me and this movie go back a long time. Even remember one of the scenes from this movie that freaked me out so much as a kid. It was the scene when Senator Kelly gets evaporated after he gets hit with Magneto's mutant making machine. Which, when you read about it on paper, it's actually a great thing. He wants to turn all the world leaders into mutants so that they can follow his cause. And especially when you compare this to the other schemes that Magneto has in the other movies, this is actually probably his smartest and most humane idea. Unfortunately for him, the machine does not work, so the X-Men have to stop him before he ends up annihilating a bunch of people accidentally. It just has a really solid story. It feels like a great first chapter. It was just a good time to go back and revisit this one. Next one. Now, if the first movie was really good, what's the sequel like? X2 kicks the shit out of it. I mean that the best way possible. This movie fucking rules. If the first film felt like a good, solid opening chapter, then this thing is just a sleek monolith probably the wrong word. It's just this sleek, slick, straightforward, just really snappy piece of movie making right here. It almost feels like everything you would want out of a sequel. In fact, this feels like a perfect blueprint for the best sequels in general, like right up there with stuff like The Empire Strikes Back or The Dark Knight, which this came out before The Dark Knight, but still, it just feels like, wow, they had a perfect blueprint on how to do every X-Men movie after this one. Why did they not follow it? What this one does is that it picks up years after the Liberty Island incident, wherein Magneto's in jail, and Xavier and the rest of the mutants are off kind of enjoying their usual thing. Unfortunately, an attack on the president happens, which was committed by a mutant, which causes an insane evil colonel, played by Brian Cox, to come in and attack the Xavier Mansion. And what follows is like the rest of the X-Men kind of scrambling together, trying to unite themselves. And on top of that, they have to get the help of Magneto and Mystique to help out in defeating Stryker. It's just such a charismatic sequel. It's so entertaining. Right from the opening sequence when Nightcrawler comes in, beats the crap out of the Secret Service agents in the White House, to the final shot of seeing the Phoenix in the river as it slowly begins to resurrect Jean Grey. It's just such a great sequel. It's so entertaining. It's a movie loaded with so many memorable lines, so many memorable scenes. I can't get over how good the pacing is. The visual effects still hold up. It's so entertaining. Why didn't we get enough of these films that were as good as this one, or at least were as furiously paced as this monster was? I absolutely loved going back to this one. This film was so great. It really was. I could probably be all here discussing all my praise I have for X-Men 2, and weirdly enough, it's not even my favorite X-Men movie. We're not even done here yet, folks. Oh, man. But unfortunately, as much as I love praising this one, not all good times can be had. So, leads us to this one. X3, The Last Stand. Alright, so, for the longest time, I actually didn't have a copy of this movie because I didn't want to buy it. But with the recent purchase of Disney and Fox, and how I kind of noticed that, a lot of discs are going out of print, and how Disney has said that they're not interested in physical media that much anymore, or cataloging their titles, I was thrown into a bit of a panic mode and decided to buy The Last Stand. I got this disc for about $15 off of Amazon. I have to say, for an really early Blu-ray disc, it still holds up really well. It looks and sounds terrific. It has a 6.1 audio track, etc., etc. Yeah, so I'm glad to know that it still looks and sounds great. Shame the movie sucks. Oh man, I have so many fucking questions as to why this movie is bad. The weird thing is that I really don't explain what my rating... if you go on my Letterboxd profile and you see the ratings I have for films, I just do, I use the stars that are on there, but I don't use half stars. I just use 1, 2, 3, 4s, and 5s. I give this film 2 stars because there is good stuff in it. But man, the temptation to give it 1 star because of all the stuff in it that just infuriates me is really, really, really tempting. Where to start with the problems with this movie? Well, for one thing, Bryan Singer, much of a scumbag as he is a good director. So he directed the first 2 films. Those are really solid, and he had a good collection of screenwriters helping him out on the first couple of movies. Guys like David Hayter and Michael Dougherty and Dan Harris. These were guys who were really good at writing the scripts for these films, being so concise and to the point as they were. This one was not directed by Bryan Singer, nor was it written by those other guys I just mentioned. This one was directed by Brett Ratner, the guy who did the Rush Hour movies and Red Dragon, which, I would only say Red Dragon is the only good movie Brett Ratner's ever directed, but... And the screenwriters in this one were Simon Kinberg and Zach Penn. This is actually Kinberg's first stab at the X-Men franchise. He would later become a major player for, a majority of the rest of the franchise, starting around First Class, was it? Or was it the Wolverine? Let's see. Is he a producer? Yeah, I think, starting around X-Men First Class, he actually started to become a full-blown producer on these movies. I'll need to look it up and see if he was also involved in X-Men Origins Wolverine, but I don't think he was. And, man, talk about a bad first impression. So, this movie has 2 different plot lines in it, both of which are really good ideas, but instead of just making a movie that just focuses on one idea, it pools its resources into one good story idea and takes the other good story idea, chops it in half, and regulates it to a dumb subplot where it should be the main goal. The story goes is that there is a mutant cure that is being manufactured, and Magneto does not like it, so he wants to go ahead and assemble an army and destroy any trace of the cure, and the X-Men want to stop him. But at the same time, Jean Grey comes back after the end of X2, and she's now full blown Carrie. They describe her as she has become her alternate personality, the Phoenix, which this film's like crappy idea of like what a adaptation of the Dark Phoenix saga is, where in the comics Jean Grey ends up basically becoming this like cosmic entity kind of thing. Here she's just doing like Famke Jensen is just doing a Carrie impression for 140 minutes, and it's like anytime the movie's doing the Cure stuff, it's honestly not bad. In fact, the first 20 minutes of this movie are really, really promising. But the moment Famke Jensen comes back in, the whole thing just totals. Like, it just goes straight down in quality. It's almost baffling how bad it gets. From the crappy one-liners to just how inconsistent some of the character writing gets. Like, what they do to Magneto in this, everyone can criticize what they, did to Jean Grey in this, and they are fully within their rights. In fact, I'd probably agree with them, but I'd say the damage that they do to Magneto in this one is worse. I understand that, like over the course of the movies, his actions become more violent, more aggressive, but here, it feels violent. Like his violence and aggression just gets to the point where it just feels so out of character. Like when Mystique gets hit with the Cure, it's like he doesn't show much in the way of it's like he shows some degree of grief, but I'd figure he would be a lot more emotional about it. Instead, it just kind of comes off like, oh, you're not blue anymore. Oh well. Like, I feel like if there was a different version of this movie, he would show a lot more emotion, or even offer to, like, this might sound a bit dark, but I think it'd be more consistent. He would offer to, like, spare Mystique the life of being a mutant. The life of being a human, and offer to kill her. I almost kind of think that'd be, that would still be pretty bad, but it would at least feel more dramatic and consistent with his character. Or how he sends his mutant army to basically be cannon fodder, which, of course, it plays into the whole chess motifs that have gone on in these movies between Xavier and Magneto. But at the same time, to me, it just kind of feels like, Magneto does have compassion. I just kind of don't like how it just kind of throws it all out the window. And another thing I'm really frustrated with by this script is that so much of the dialogue and even the tone of it doesn't even feel like something that was written in the same decade. The script for this movie feels like it was written in like 1995, because it's like throwing out just like really dorky terms that aren't even like consistent with this movie's like established vibe and tone with the previous two. And the whole thing's just a mess. It's so infuriating to watch. It isn't without its pluses. There's quite a bit of good performances. The action is well done. Kelsey Grammer as Beast is one of the best casting decisions this series ever did, and it sucks they never got to do it again, save for a cameo in Days of Future Past. He was going to be in Days of Future Past, but due to some scheduling conflicts, he could only do a cameo, which sucks. But, yeah, I really don't like this one. I only bought it just for completionist's sake, and to give it a feeling like, there's an actual little throw line here. But hey, it's not all bad. It actually, as bad as that movie was, it did give us a couple other good ones in return. Next up, The Wolverine. This movie's like a weird twofer. It both is a response to both the failures of X-Men Origins Wolverine and The Last Stand. It's a response to the failures of X-Men Origins Wolverine because Origins Wolverine wasn't a good Wolverine movie. This is a better one. And the other thing that it helps fix is it actually acts as a direct sequel to The Last Stand, where it picks up in Wolverine, where he's hiding out in the woods, just trying to escape all his trauma and grief that happened ever since the events of The Last Stand, until he gets contacted by this mysterious Japanese woman to have him come with her to Japan to meet with an old friend and participate in a surgery that could rid him of his immortality. He's tempted at first, but he ultimately declines. But then somehow, mysteriously, his regenerating abilities get taken away anyway. And much like this is such a wonderfully focused tight little character study of Wolverine. It comes with two different versions. There's the PG-13 theatrical version and the unrated cut. I personally go with the unrated cut. It's got some extra good character bits in it, and plus also it's able to embrace the violence that unfortunately isn't all that present in the theatrical version, including a bit where Wolverine fights against some ninjas in a village and he throws one of them into a chipper shredder. That scene's fucking awesome. I love that bit. But I know people always have issues with the final third of the movie where Wolverine ends up fighting against a giant robot, kind of feeling like it goes against the tone and, like the vibe that the movie had been setting up beforehand. I never really felt like that. To me, this story felt consistent from the beginning, and if I care about the characters and what's, and what they're doing on screen, you can get away with anything. Like, when Wolverine starts fighting a giant robot samurai at the end, all right, whatever. I still care about his fate. I cringe every time he gets his claws ripped off by the adamantium blade when that happens. I remember when that first happened, I was like, oh, Jesus. And then when they start filing him down, his life essence ends up getting drained. That was bad. That was really, really bad, but it was cool at the same time. It's a great little story. I love the setting in Japan. And on top of that, it also sets up the events of what would be the next film to come in the series, which I personally think is the series' high point. Fun story behind of how I saw Days of Future Past back in 2014. It was a last minute thing. I had just watched The Wolverine, and it was coming out in just a few weeks. And my friend Katie offered, hey, do you want to go see it? And I was hearing all sorts of good reviews, and I was like, okay, sure. I like those X-Men movies. It's been a long time since I've seen them, but, Wolverine got me in a good mood, and I'm willing to see where this goes next. And then we go down to sit down to see it in the theater. It was like a Saturday afternoon. And I have to say, watching it was an extremely fond memory. X-Men Days of Future Past, for me, is and will still be not only the best X-Men movie, but I would go so far as to say one of the superhero genre's highlights since The Dark Knight. And one of the reasons why is that it tells such a grand, oddly compassionate story about changing the future for, changing the future for the better. Changing, so many things so that other people can have better lives. There's a line in it that Xavier says to his younger self, that Patrick Stewart says to James McAvoy, which is a pretty great moment. I forget the exact line of dialogue, but it goes like, just because someone stumbles and loses their way doesn't mean they're lost forever. And it's such a moving movie. Oh, there's plenty of stuff in it that, you would want out of a superhero movie. There's plenty of action, there's plenty of humor, there's plenty of drama, but there's also just such a humanistic aspect about the movie that really, really pulled me in. This is one of those, so many superhero plots have the whole end of the world plot happening, and it's like, after a certain point, those kind of plots, it just kind of feels like the tension's just of course it's not going to happen. There's no tension behind this. This one, the world has already ended, and now we just have this small collection of people just trying to survive for themselves and trying to make things better in the past. And that's what I think, gives it such a tension-fueled ride. And on top of that, how it manages to combine the casts of both the old trilogy and the first class into one singular film, bouncing between different timelines, having so many plot elements and story beats to juggle without throwing them out of the way in a film that doesn't even run 2.5 hours. This is just the theatrical version I have. It runs around 2 hours and 15 minutes. The road cut, I think, is close to 2.5 hours. I don't have much interest in getting the road cut. I'm fine with this version. It just feels so, it feels like a true blue accomplishment. This was the series doing its Avengers moment. And they passed it with flying colors. this is always going to be the best film in the series for me. It's a shame we never really did get an installment that was as good as this one, but better to have like the best one of them all than anything, I guess. Also, a little bit of note: this packaging I got for it was the Target exclusive. I got it for $20 years ago. It's a metal pack. Comes with a copy of the movie, digital code. I already used it. Some dumb second screen app. I don't even know if that still works. And a little art book, with like fan art in it. Let's see. Yeah, see, there's more pictures in here. I don't know if this was standard in other copies too. I know it came in my metal pack. I think it was. But, like, it is cool. And there's also some neat artwork in here. See? And here's the back. You can actually find this for pretty cheap these days. I was just looking around on Amazon, and they actually have this metal pack going for like $6 if you want to get one. Sure, it might not be the deluxe release that the Rogue Cut is, but that's actually a little bit pricier than this. So if you just want to get a cheap version of the movie, just the movie, go with this. You won't regret it. It sounds fantastic too. Next one. This one I was disappointed I didn't like as much going back to it, because I remember when I saw it in 2016 and really, really liking it, and watching it a couple of times since then. I liked it, but this rewatch, it just didn't hold up for me as much as I wanted it to. This was Bryan Singer's last involvement in the franchise, and I'm a little bit sad that it didn't hold up for me as much as it well did. But, it's still a good time. It still has some fun moments in it anyway. X-Men Apocalypse. Before I continue, yeah, this is another neat little packaging. This is a steelbook I got of it. It was the steelbook Best Buy. I got it around the time it came out. This thing was pretty pricey. I think it was like $25+ or something. Nah, who cares? It's cool. And I don't have much in the way of steelbooks. I've got a couple of steelbooks of stuff like Glass, Django Unchained, Gladiator, so it doesn't hurt to have something like this every once in a while, even if it isn't for like a movie you particularly love. There's a lot of good things in X-Men Apocalypse. There really, really is. It's got, it's got tremendous scale, a lot of good performances, surprisingly diverse color palette. I'd say out of all the X-Men movies, this is the one where they really kind of went out of their way to make a movie that just feels like a freaking rainbow of color in like almost every scene. Like there are scenes where it's like you're seeing purples and greens and blues and reds and browns. Like it has such this like weirdly shifting color palette throughout the whole thing. It's weirdly kind of wonderful. I actually really like the villain Apocalypse himself, Oscar Isaac. I know everyone else I know just about anybody who talks about this movie kind of dismisses him as just a ridiculous bad guy, but I think he's cool, and I think he has presence, and he's creepy, and I even prefer the Quicksilver sequence in this one to the one that's in Days of Future Past. Everyone loves that one, but to me, that one, it's fun, but it's too brief, and Quicksilver himself is actually just kind of more of like just like a funny little side character. Here in Apocalypse, he actually has more development, and the sequence he has in this one is more elaborate and more entertaining. But unfortunately, Apocalypse has something that the other Singer movie... This one doesn't have what the other Singer movies do have, which is structural tightness and a concise narrative. The first hour of this movie, going back to it, I was almost surprised at how much it just felt completely all over the place. How much it felt like I was watching just a string of cool scenes kind of being just randomly strung together. His other three films really felt like they were, it's like there were a series of scenes, but they all felt like events that were all kind of like eventually going to collide together. This one just kind of feels like and it feels so weird. It doesn't even really get any proper narrative momentum going until I would say around the final third or so, when the big battle happens in Cairo and Apocalypse engages in his grand plan to turn like the world into his dominion. I was just kind of watching there like I'm never bored by this, but man, it's messy and all over the place. What the hell? And it just, man, I really wish I liked this as much as I did when I first saw it back then. It's still a fun movie to watch, but man, it out of watching all these movies, I'd say it was probably the most disappointing one to come back to. It's not the worst one. That one still goes to The Last Stand, and I would still take this movie in first class any day of the friggin' week over The Last Stand. If anyone tries to convince me that this is worse than The Last Stand, I don't agree with you. So, there's one more here. The last one. To me, like, even though technically the last X-Men movie was the New Mutants, to me, if someone were to ask me what was the final X-Men movie, I would say, like, what would, if someone were to ask me what was the ending of this entire saga, it was this one, Logan. Hugh Jackman's final take on Wolverine, where he ends up reuniting with the director of the other Wolverine movie, James Mangold, and delivers a final coda for the character that is grueling, brutal, depressing, almost kind of a little unwatchable at times, but nevertheless emotionally effective, thoroughly engaging, almost beautifully coherent. And I'm sorry if, like, it's not that I'm running out of words or anything, but it's one of those movies that to me, it cuts deep. It's not the best X-Men movie for my money, but it is definitely up there. It's up there among the best installments in the series. It is such an emotional whopper of the film. It's even funny in some scenes. Like, if how this one is, how it picks up, like with the idea of, like, like what if, like it kind of asks the question, what happens when superheroes get old and they're no longer, the awesome beings they used to be? Well, you get this movie, and it's not a pretty sight to see. Everything from seeing Wolverine struggling to regenerate or properly pull his claws out like he used to seeing Xavier like just running around and like just like in his wheelchair just like spinning around spouting friggin' Taco Bell commercials, which that should be funny, but it's not. It's just really fucking depressing. And having his major seizures, which combined with that superpowered psychic brain of his, how much they cause everyone to just freeze in place and they can't do anything, which, as the film implies, led to accidental destruction of the X-Men. It's not an easy ride to sit through. It really isn't. But it's also a story with hope at the end of it, thanks to this little girl that Wolverine and Xavier befriend named Laura, who's very much like Wolverine. This actually comes with two different cuts of the film. One that presents the movie in color, and another that presents the film in black and white. For me personally, I actually prefer watching the black and white version. It looks good in color, don't get me wrong, but the black and white version really gives it this like vibe about it that feels so different than the other films. I know Mangold and Jackman, they kind of had like this like idea where it's like they wanted to make a Wolverine movie that felt, like that anybody could watch. They succeeded in that, but I think it also doubly works as a film for people who have had investment with this series. Like, if you were to watch all the films and then end with this one, it would feel like a perfect, just like, wow, this is a perfect little, like finale to all of this. It tells such a nice, simple, violent story, emotionally and genuinely. And at the end of it, you feel satisfied. You feel like you've been on a long journey. And it was one hell of a journey. So yeah, it's been fun going back to these movies. It really has been. If I were to do a ranking of them, I'll just go over it really quickly. Days of Future Past, X2, Logan, The Wolverine, X-Men, New Mutants, I'd have to give this one a rewatch, see how it holds up. It might end up being an apocalypse situation where it doesn't, so I'm just putting it here temporarily. Um, Apocalypse. No, wait. Deadpool 2, Apocalypse, First Class, Dark Phoenix, Deadpool. Not much fan of Deadpool. Origins, and The Last Stand. Yeah, that's how I'd rank the series. I probably should have done like a little infograph right here, just kind of showing what my rankings are. I might even just provide like a link to my Letterboxd list of just showing what I think of these movies. And I know I didn't cover every single one of them. I have seen them all. I like just to quickly run them down. Origins. I just kind of think that movie's just like whatever. It's not good, but it doesn't infuriate me like The Last Stand does. Dark Phoenix, I thought was better than its reputation suggests. Like, it definitely has the feeling of a movie that's been meddled and tinkered to hell and back, but I was expecting something really goddamn disastrous, and instead I got something that was just fine. And the Deadpool movies, I don't like the first one because I came here to see a Deadpool movie, not a goddamn bunch of sappy ass bullshit. Deadpool 2 actually gave me a Deadpool movie, and I very much enjoyed that. So yeah, that's about it for my little X-Men video. I hope all of you enjoy it. Also, just a little reminder, wearing this shirt again, yay. I've got another video that I'm planning to do talking about that double bill that Barbara and I did. I don't know if I'll film that today or sometime this week, but it'll come after this one. Anyway, all of you have a good one.